Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is HowFast. Today we begin the saga of fixing Hildi's worn out wheel bearing. This has been something that's been plaguing me now for, it's been a couple months. Been making some funny noises. It's gotten progressively worse. About a month ago we pulled her in here, we took a look at what was going on. It turns out the nut, which is a 36 mil 12-point socket if you remember, that will not take that axle nut off. It is literally welded to the end of the axle shaft, and I wouldn't hesitate to think that the axle shaft is probably welded into the carrier itself as well. So there's going to be a test. There's tasks ahead of me right here, and I've done a lot of research and a lot of looking and a lot of figuring and a lot of watching of YouTube and reading up on different ways to get this done, and here's what I've come up with. So what we have here to start, we'll start with this. Here's the piece that's gone bad. This is the wheel bearing for an E90 BMW. There's a specific way that this goes in so that the wheel speed sensor can read it. I made sure to recognize what side that is. This also comes with a retaining clip to hold it into place into the carrier. I've got a new axle nut, but luckily the new axle that I've bought comes with a new axle nut. Why have I bought a new axle, you ask? Well, we anticipate that this thing's going to be locked in there. We know that that old nut is welded onto the end of the old axle, so I'm going to probably have to destroy the nut and in turn destroy the end of the old axle. So I'm going to need a new axle and a new bearing. I've got those. Now, getting the bearing out of the carrier. That's what all this stuff is about. What I'm planning on doing here is I'm going to cut down this 3/4 inch threaded rod. I'm going to thread these onto either end, and behind that bearing, or behind the old bearing in the carrier, we're going to place this. Right? I'm going to put this threaded end and a couple washers on the back of this, and then we're going to place this on the front side with a piece of wood drilled through and a couple more washers, and we're going to crank down on this thing and hopefully pull the bearing out of the carrier. It's risky. I've obviously never made my own bearing puller before, but that's never stopped me before either. So lots of research, like I said, guys, so I'm hopeful that this will turn out. I'm hoping that we're going to get this to work because I really don't have any other options, and I drive an hour to and from work every day. So my car, this car, as fuel efficient and safe as it is critical to me keeping my job. So we got to get this done. So enough jibber jabber, let's get to it. Okay boys, let me show you what we're working with. Up in here is the back of the axle where it meets the differential. I need to drop the exhaust right here. 1 bracket, 2 brackets, 3 brackets right there. I'm gonna drop the exhaust so I can get access to those special E-torque bolts. I'm gonna pull those down. Once I drop the back end of that axle, should be nothing keeping me from smacking it through once I cut through that nut. So I'm gonna get this off first, and then we are gonna start working on cutting that nut off. Is that light in your face, guys? Because it's in mine. I thought this was an E-torque. You know, that first nut, I thought it was going to get stuck. It was going to be stuck, and piece of piece, it came right off. Hildi was like, "Do you forget who you're working on?" I'm like, I'm sorry. You know, with that wheel nut being welded on there like that, I forgot for a second. Alright, we have the axle disconnected at the back. Now I'm going to work on grinding that nut off the end of that axle. Fun times.
Guys, I hesitate to say this was a complete success so far. Okay? I managed to not mess up the threads. I mean, other than one little spot I can see back there, but other than that, the rest of it looks great.
Now, there is always the chance that this axle is stuck inside the carrier, and I might mess up the end of this thing trying to get it out of there. So that, we're not out of the woods yet. We still might need that axle, so that's a good thing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slip underneath here. I'll grab 2 of the bolts that bolt this thing into the differential, and I'm going to stick them in there just loosely so that it's lined up. And then we're going to get a gear puller, and we're going to pull out, well, we're going to pull all the brakes off, and then we're going to put a gear puller on the hub here and pull the hub off using the end of the axle, hopefully. Let's give it a go. Ah, man. Between you and I was not expecting that to go so poorly. I thought I was going to be able to, like, put the gear puller on the axle and just pull this thing off, but it just started pushing the axle in. So I had to use, you saw me there, I used some sockets and some plate steel and created like a little base for the wheel studs to push through, and use that to separate the hub there. So we've exposed the bearing. Here is the failing bearing. And the hub, which has still got the race on it, which I'm going to have to cut off very carefully. And then we got to get the axle back out. We got to undo that one bolt we got in the back. We got to get the axle out of the way. And then we're going to start building our puller. Yeah, you know, I was really hoping I wasn't going to have to do this, but it looks like I'm going to have to take off a bunch of the bolts around here that are of the connecting arms and tip this thing forward just to get a little bit more access to get the axle out of the back. So I'm going to get working at those right now. Okay guys, so 2 huge hurdles covered, okay? We got the hub off, next one we have the axle out. Third one is we got to get the bearing out. But before we do that, I wanted to take a look at the axle that we just pulled out next to the axle that I bought. Now, at first glance, overall length, overall size, everything looks to be the same. But when you look real close at the diameter of the shaft of these two things, you notice that the new one is definitely smaller. Definitely not as stout as the OEM one. Now, I bought this with anticipation that I was going to mangle the front end of this thing getting it out. Well, guess what? It's not mangled. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this one back in. I'm going to return this, get my money back, and keep the thicker drive shaft. Sounds like a plan, right? Well, let's hope there's nothing wrong with this one. I'll put it in, and fingers crossed before I return the new one, we'll give it a go with putting the original one back in. So great, a couple $100, about $300 saved there. Next, moving on, time to make a bearing puller. Here's what I've done. I've cut down this 3/4 inch threaded rod to about 15 inches. On the end, we've got a big nut, and I've ground down. This is like a post, like something you can attach a post to your deck, right? I just ground that down. It's almost exactly 2 inches, so I took just a little bit off of it, made it so it's just inside the inside diameter, or the outside diameter of the bearing. So that should slip behind the bearing, and then we're gonna feed this in
from the back. That's going to push up against the back of the bearing. On the front side, we're going to put this over here, like this. And then on that will be this block of wood where the rod will feed through. And then we'll put another one of those nuts on the end with some washers. With any luck, this should pull this piece out. So I'm going to set up the camera. Wish me luck, guys. This is the final hurdle.
Okay guys, it's the next day. I tried last night, got to a point with that bearing where I said, okay, I don't think I want to push this any further. Took a break, took a step back. We jumped a lot of good hurdles yesterday. You know, it was a good day, productive day. Today, I'm back. I'm gonna try and I'm gonna throw a little bit of heat into this thing with the torch and see if we can get things to move a little with the homemade bearing puller. So wish me luck. Okay, admittedly that was a failure. I am pretty tired. This thing is taking its toll on me, that's for sure. Okay, so beta version failed. I can admit that. Version 2.0. Use this hunk of steel I got left over from Dudgy. I'm going to cut it in half, double it up, get it to be like, I don't know, almost half an inch thick. Lay it over top of this, which, by the way, shout out to the black pipe. I can't believe this thing's still in one piece after that 2x4. Like, look at this 2x4. It's like split, like, you know. This thing held up pretty good. So I'm going to double this up, drill a hole in it. We're going to do it on there, and then we're going to take this thing, we're going to shave it down a little bit more on the inside there so it's right on the edge of the bearing. And try that, and more heat, more heat. More heat. Okay guys, next day, defeated again. Every effort I've put into getting that bearing to break loose has been useless. I'm totally defeated. Last night around midnight, I put out an ad on Facebook Marketplace for Dresden here. Believe it or not, a fellow named Jeff actually replied and he said, "Hey, I got a press. I'm just up the way here." So I'm and he'd actually heard of HowFast, which is great. So I'm gonna have the carrier pulled out. I've got the hub with the race pulled off of it. I've got some tools in here, and I'm going to head down to his place, and we're going to use his press and see if we can push this bearing out. I'm so fed up with this thing. I want this done. So let's get on the road right now. Jeff, thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, not a problem.
Thank you so much, man. I couldn't have done this without you. There it is, guys. Thank goodness for Jeff. You know, without him, you know, getting in touch with me last night, I would not have been able to get this done. This would not have come out without a press. So thanks again, Jeff. I really appreciate it. Couldn't have done this without you. I'm gonna get to putting this stuff all back together now. Hopefully we can get this done tonight. I'll be able to take the car to work tomorrow.
Okay, James, can I have one bolt, please? Thank you.
That didn't work. Dada. Why is your hand so dirty?
Okay, can you pass me my ratchet, please?
Ratchet.
Right here. That's the ratchet.
Is that the ratchet?
That's the ratchet. And can you pass me a bolt, please?
Yes. Is it about one?
Please, thank you.
Ty, I dropped it. There.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's episode. She's complete. She's finished. She drives like a dream. The noise is gone. It's my old Hildi back again, and I couldn't be happier. And it's a beautiful night. It's a beautiful night tonight. What a great night for a cruise. But instead of going for a cruise, I'm going to spend a little bit of time with Hudson, and we're going to knock out a couple of nagging little issues on his go-kart and let him take that for a rip. So, back to the BMW, lesson learned. I would rate this like a 8 out of 10 on difficulty. Special tools needed, really just a press, which I considered buying and now kind of wish I had. Good news though, I can return that axle. I didn't destroy it in the process, so I can return that, get a couple $100 back, and maybe buy myself a press. So I wanted to congratulate Craig on winning the HowFast trivia, and I had mentioned to you guys that there was some new HowFast gear coming out, a new design. So what had happened is, going across Facebook, I came across a local artist. I say local, he's a couple hours north of here, and he had done some renderings for a couple guys, and I thought this would be a great addition to the HowFast gear. So the gentleman's name was Danny Rutherford, and I reached out to him, and he said absolutely he would help us out. And here's what he came up with for our shirt design. So this, guys, is the new Dudgy 18 t-shirt and design. This will be available on sweaters, t-shirts, long sleeves. And I wanted to give a big shout out to Danny, and I'm going to put a link to his contact info below. So if you guys ever want to get in touch with Danny for any reason, maybe have him do one of your cars, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to help. So also, I'm going to be putting up this design on the howfast.ca website with all his info there. So if you guys want to get in touch, I really suggest you do. And I want to say thanks again, Dan, for everything, man. Really great work. I love your work, and we'll be in touch. Now, trivia. Last week, you guys, I think it was almost unanimous, wanted to continue the trivia regardless of there not being a prize. So what we've got this week is another question for you. The question for this week: in what year was the Porsche 911 introduced? Was it A, 1973, B, 1963, C, 1953, or D, 1983? So I look forward to hearing your comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share. I'll catch up with you next time. Find out how fast we can make this car go.